Hello, my name is Nicole He, and today I'm going to give a talk about video games and also what it feels like to talk to your computer. So, I'm a game developer, but in the past I worked as a creative technologist, and thematically, my work is often about things like um, the relationships between people and computers, or the way that science fiction informs our expectations of technology. But these days, I'm a full time indie game developer, I guess still exploring these themes, but more in the medium of video games. Um, but anyway, I am currently working on two games that are still in progress and both still unannounced, and one of which is a sort of normal commercial indie video game. That's going to be published by Devolver Digital, and the other of which is like I would say the less normal video game, and that's the one that I'm going to be talking about right now. So the game is called Cyberspace, and it's produced by the National Film Board of Canada. And Cyberspace is a sci-fi narrative game that you play by talking, like with your mouth out loud at a computer, and the computer talks back to you. So I'll show you a little clip of the gameplay. And disclaimer, as with all sorts of demos like this isn't exactly how the game will be necessarily, but you get the idea.
For the purposes of pre-mission diagnostics, please tell me what is your favorite animal to have as a pet?
My favorite animal is a tarantula.
Okay, spiders, widely feared animals. I am creating an archive of information about this creature right now. What do you like about spiders?
They're just like cool as hell.
Okay, so short clip for a short talk, but anyway, it's a weird thing, right? Like a video game that you play by talking. But today I want to talk with you about some of the reasons why I decided to make a thing like this, as like an artist and as a coder, and why this game that is enabled by very modern technology is actually quite inspired by a lot of older and very different exploration games. So my favorite video games have always been about exploration and adventure. So I love the feeling of being in a place, often meticulously and lovingly designed by somebody, traversing it and finding every nook and cranny and every secret. And I think the reason why this is appealing is pretty clear, right? Like it mirrors a childhood experience of walking through an untrailed forest, turning over rocks and finding frogs and other magical creatures. And it's about having a sense of wonder about the world, like a feeling that you can't fully predict what will happen, but in an exciting way. And as we get older, we have fewer and fewer of these types of experiences where we feel that sense of awe and wonder about the possibilities of life. Getting older means doors closing behind you and having more narrow vision of what's to come in your future. And it means that you're hurtling towards death. But exploring in a video game brings back, at least for me, a little bit of this childhood wonder. So, video games allow us to explore without consequences, right? It's the fantasy that you get to do incredible things without anything bad happening. As an aside, this particular game, Tomb Raider 2, was especially formative for me as a kid. It was like terrifying and it scared the shit out of me, but it gave me this like feeling of being a really cool, powerful woman exploring exotic locations around the world. And actually, there's a scene at the end of this particular level where Lara Croft is like using a laptop inside a cave in the Great Wall of China. And I guess that subconsciously inspired me as some kind of dream job, for better or worse. But, it's more than just about the joy of wandering through a beautiful landscape or something like that. The real pleasure, in my opinion, is learning the systems of the world that you're in and then testing its boundaries. So, Breath of the Wild actually does a good job of this, as an example. So, like, in Breath of the Wild, you can be like 8 hours into the game, and you've learned how the game works, and you know what you're trying to accomplish and what the game wants you to do. But then you're like, I wonder if I could shoot electric arrows into the river, and if I can kill fish that way. and then you try it and it turns out, yes, you can. Like, that's the best feeling, that's the stuff. When you have that moment of thinking, like, I wonder if this will work, and then you try it and it does work. To me, that's like the magic of games. It's the magic of like interactive experiences. It's something that's like unique, that doesn't exist in linear media. And to me, this is like all about the sublime feeling of power and exploration in an imaginary world. This is where you can actually suspend disbelief when you're familiar enough with this space for it to feel coherent as a world, but you haven't found its edges yet. And so it feels like there are unlimited possibilities. Maybe counterintuitively, I often feel like older games give a more authentic feeling of exploration. New games tend to feel more like cinematic experiences. The shadows from the trees are almost like hyper real, and Laura's hair blows in the wind, and now she has things like a perfectly diverse cast of friend characters and also emotions. But a lot of older games let you experience frustration and also, importantly, boredom. Frustration as a mechanic mirrors real life because going through life isn't a seamless, linear narrative experience. But it's difficult as a game designer to create this, right? Because anyone who makes games or actually probably does anything with a computer will know that making something pre-scripted and linear is about infinitely easier than making something procedural. But the friction that we experience and overcome is what makes something feel powerful and meaningful. So, this, I guess, is my own personal biases in terms of what kind of games I like, but I tend not to prefer games that are pure wholesomeness and sugar sweet comfort because I don't mind being asked to work through something, and I enjoy being challenged psychologically, emotionally, physically if there's a payoff. Okay, like, so what? Like, what does this have to do with my work, and what does it have to do with talking to a computer? So, I don't make gigantic open world exploration RPGs, but I do think that there's like two principles I've been talking about that are both things that I think about in my own work these days. Um, and I guess they're, in the form of questions. So one is like, how do you encourage a player to try to find the boundaries of the work? How do we build a coherent paradigm in a game and then break it in a way that feels profound? And also, what is the right level of friction and frustration for it to feel rewarding to overcome? Um, Back to talking specifically about voice technology and games built on voice technology, there are not a lot of them for good reason. And it's because the technology is very frustrating. It's very difficult to work with. And you can't really rely on it to work well. And as just to like, show you an example, here is a clip of me playing a game called Lifeline, which came out, I guess, ambitiously in 2003 on the PlayStation 2. And some context for this is like I spent like 2 hours basically trying to get through this puzzle, but the speech recognition was so bad that it kept causing me problems. Anyway, so then I reached this point about 2 hours in.
I can't go forward from here.
We're gonna make it. We're going to make it. All I have to do is get on the green. Kind of weird, right? And then get on the red. All right. Green. Forward.
Yep.
Red.
I can't go forward.
Red. Forward. Oh my god. So, me like talking about all the wonderful things about frustration as mechanic, like you can go too far. And I would say probably every voice controlled experience goes too far. But at the same time, I think there's some things that are really interesting and special that voice games can do. 99% of games where you're playing a character who has conversation, that it's a multiple choice, expression of how you interact with the world. But with voice games, it can be open input. And there are other open input games that are not necessarily voice controlled, but I do believe that having to speak with your own voice, like use your own actual physical body to play the game, changes the experience. It makes it personal. It makes it hard to not like be yourself. And I didn't really get into like cyberspace, like what the game actually is and what it's about, but it ties into like this is something that ties into the central themes of our games, of our game, the mechanics of which are mostly about having a conversation with an AI spaceship. And as the designer, there's this sort of contradictory desire to have control over the experience, but also allow for a limitless experience. So cyberspace, it's about a relationship, a fake one between the player and an AI who's trying to understand you, and it plays off of expectations of like what AI means in our popular imagination. And when the game comes out, there will also be, I guess, surprises. Um, but in the end, I think it's a pretty lofty goal to try to create something that achieves these sort of elusive emotions to balance challenging a player with not necessarily making them like scream in rage. To create a system where you as a designer can control it, but it's also a system that lets a player explore it. And so I'm hoping with cyberspace, at least we can elicit some kind of strange feeling in a player. And that's it. You can find me on the internet here. Thank you. Bye bye.